In this movie, I'll show you how to mix and match color harmonies, because there's nothing that says that you have to remain in lockstep with a single harmony rule. After all, color is largely a subjective creative experience. And I'll also, by the way, show you how to adjust a few settings here inside the color guide panel. So for starters, I'll select this background rectangle over here on the right-hand side, and I'll click on the down-pointing arrowhead in the top right corner of the color guide panel, and I'll go ahead and start with something simple like shades. And now notice we still have that shade of blue active for the base color. If you don't, for any reason, then just go ahead and click on one of those blue shapes and then click on that very first swatch right there to reset it. Now I'll go ahead and reselect that background rectangle over here on the right-hand side of the document, and I'll select a fairly dark shade over here on the left side of the panel. All right, now I'll select this brown rectangle in the background on the left-hand side. And this time I'll switch my color harmony to, let's say, high contrast 1. And you can experiment with whatever colors you want, by the way. There are obviously no right answers, even if you violently disagree with the changes that I'm making. But I'm going to go ahead and select a warm brown, again from the left-hand side. And then I'll click in one of these very bright blue shapes, and just so I can better see what I'm doing, I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac to hide those anchor points. And I'll just go ahead and fish around here inside my list of color harmonies. And let's say this time I want something like analogous 2, because I'm looking for a shade of green, like so, a kind of greenish blue, probably something brighter like that. And then I'll go ahead and click in one of the bright rectangles, and I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac to bring back my anchor points. And this time I'll select pentagram from the bottom of the list, and I'll go with this bright shade of yellow, like so. All right, now I'll press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac in order to deselect my artwork. Now, of course, that is one and only one possible color scheme, which is why I also have my original grayscale version of the illustration open. And so this time I'll click in one of the medium gray shapes, and I'm going to return to complementary 2, if only because it has a wide variety of colors. And I'll go with a darker shade of blue like so. And then I'll click in this background rectangle on the right-hand side, and I'll select maybe this shade of brown right there. Now, by the way, notice at the top here, we see shades versus tints. And so this little arrowhead right there, it's not something that you click on. It just indicates the active colors. And those are the colors that define the core harmony up here at the top of the panel. And then by default, we have darker shades on the left and brighter tints on the right. If you want different variations in the central portion of this panel, then click on the flyout menu icon in the top right corner of the color guide panel and choose, for example, Show Warm to Cool, which is going to give you warmer swatches over here on the left-hand side of the panel and cooler swatches on the right. And so that'll allow me to select the big left-hand rectangle and change it to, let's say, this shade of orange, I think will work. All right, now I'll go ahead and click on one of these light gray shapes. And again, because there's so many anchor points, I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac to hide them. And I'll return to that flyout menu icon in the top right corner of the color guide panel, and I'll change it to Show Vivid Muted, which should really read Muted Vivid, because the muted colors, that is the low saturation colors, appear on the left-hand side, and the vivid high saturation colors appear on the right. And I'll select this relatively muted brown here in the bottom row. I think will work better. And then finally, you can change how many swatches you're seeing in the central portion of the panel by clicking on the flyout menu icon and choosing Color Guide Options, which is going to bring up this little dialog box right here. And I want you to notice that it previews its effects automatically on the fly. And so I can go with less variation if I want to by cranking this value down. And once you get to a variation of 0%, you get no variation across each one of the rows. I want a lot of variation, however, so I'm going to crank this guy up to 100, and I'm going to increase the number of steps as well. And you can take this steps value all the way up to 20. And by the way, 4 steps means 4 steps to the right and 4 steps to the left. And so if I go up to 20, I'm going to get a ton of steps to the point that each one of these rows looks like a gradient. That's a little bit too much, I think. So I'll take the steps value down to 10, and I'll click OK. And then I'll click on the flyout menu icon once again and switch back to Show Tints and Shades. And then I'll click in one of these bright rectangles and press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac to bring back the anchor points so that I know that they're for sure selected. And I'll click in this brightest swatch in the second to last row, and then I'll deselect my artwork by pressing Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac. And that's it, folks. Here's our first color variation, and here's our second one, both of which are a result of mixing and matching harmony rules and color guide settings here inside Illustrator.